Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes.
We have a keynote that we give quite regularly, actually, about syndroming women and all the different things, the labels or the syndromes we apply to women when we behave out of character or the perceived character, or we do not meet expectations, gendered expectations of how we should behave. And there are some really fascinating ones. We cycle through them. You should book us to do this keynote. It's amazing. It's things like bicycle face, princess syndrome, rushing woman syndrome, imposter syndrome. There's so many. And it's a very interesting, wild history of how we label women as the problem. So, what we thought we would do, though, today is maybe talk a little bit about how sometimes we frame ourselves as the problem.
Yeah. Well, we've kind of gone through this history of syndroming and called out the really popular ones. But I think what we're trying to get to is that, yes, society is trying to slap a label on us, but often we accept the label and apply it to ourselves as well. And what we've noticed is a real shift in society about, I'm going to use this word because we'll start with this and then we'll move into kind of this next idea that you're talking about. What it got us thinking about pathologizing kind of everyday life, like the fact that we are syndroming ourselves when we have a feeling of nerves. And we've done a podcast episode on this. I wish I could call it out. I used to be able
Oh no,
to.
she's lost her
We've
touch.
I mean, we're going back 2 years now, but, I will put it in the notes on imposter syndrome and how we kind of, talk a little bit about this. It's kind of often, it's every day. It is a very real feeling, by the way, but let's just be careful to syndrome every time we feel nervous or anxious or a little bit of a wobble or fear to syndrome ourselves, and I think the same can be true for pathologizing everyday life. I watched a fascinating interview on TV the other day that said this has really been normalized on Insta, TikTok, and in lives of teens, of our children. And I noticed this when my daughter was at high school, all girls school, and it seemed like they were really happy to drop any studying, any exams, any pressure, any intense environments. They're willing to drop that from the curriculum and give girls a pass because of anxiety and skyrocketing anxiety and mental health in the school. And I thought, right to the point of the girls showed up for a classroom, one of their exams, and the classroom had to be changed for one reason or another. I'm not sure it was, but they had to travel from that classroom to another side of the school where it was a new classroom, and they had to sit this exam. Well, they were invited to retake the exam because of the stress of the changed classroom had put on the girls. And I just looked at my daughter and I said, you know, this isn't real life, though, right? Like when you get outside school, you know that we do not cater to every time there is a little bit of hardship or stress or increased pressure when it comes to, I don't know, being graded or having to succeed or exceed, whatever it is. And yeah, I really struggled with it. As a caveat, I do want to say we're not here to minimize real mental health struggles. Those are real, those are serious. So put that aside, please, and just let us dig into what very healthy people are describing themselves as having, again, a clinical diagnosis when what they are having are symptoms of real and everyday feelings.
Yes, and I agree with you. There are some very serious, and I suppose it's the double-edged sword, and this is always the case when we have done the great work of normalizing, looking out for our mental health, really recognizing some of the very real challenges that people face. All of that is amazing. Sometimes what happens is we go to the extreme where we start to then assume everything that happens is something like that, and then we create that reality for ourselves. So I feel like, I'm nervous to go to an event. I feel like this is one I hear a lot. Couple of years ago, you'd be nervous to go to an event. Now I suffer social anxiety. It's like it's become an identity rather than I'm nervous about going to an event. Like, I don't know what social anxiety is. I haven't looked up the clinical definition. I'm not even sure if most people who say they have it have got a diagnosis. I'm not even sure if it is a diagnosable thing, but it is a label we are very quick to slap on ourselves when we feel nervous about turning up at something, which, in my opinion, my entire life I felt nervous about turning up at things. And I feel like the reason we care is not to belittle or to say that, you're silly if you do this. It's just that we know the power of the stories we tell ourselves. And if I tell myself that I have anxiety, social anxiety, some of the other things that you hear a lot is even not even pathologizing, but like, I'm terrible at this. I'm underconfident. I can't handle this. Oh, look at me with my ADHD behavior. Again, not diagnosed and not even properly really thought through and even without, spending the fortune, and I do recognize it takes a fortune to get a diagnosis, but really investigating and researching and thinking through how it might play out, just sort of slapping on the label, you are telling yourself things about who you are in a way that can actually really limit yourself. Where yeah, yeah.
Well, that's what I felt the schools and institutions are doing. They're playing a really a role here in limiting our children who are going into an incredibly I know they're trying to protect them and they're placing frameworks around again some really serious issues, but people like my daughter are starting to were at the time using this terminology, which I think does a couple things. Number one, it's limiting her in terms of her feeling uncomfortable. And I remember at one point, and this is very common for her age group, not wanting to make a phone call when it was something that she was fully invested in. Like it wasn't my job to make a phone call around. I can't even remember what it was. Probably checking if her shoes or, that she'd ordered were in, as an example. And she kind of chalked up to, well, because I have social anxiety. And I thought, whoa, 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 hang on a sec. Again, this was something that was probably normalized for her at school and within her friend group. Um, Not only does it do a disservice and limits her in her communication skills and what is a skill that she should be using, and thankfully does now, but equally it does a disservice to those that genuinely do have social anxiety because now she gets put into a she's I just think it's really
You're
it's
using the label
disrespectful.
flippantly when someone
Yeah.
actually really
Like,
struggles with
actually
it.
does and needs to go to therapy for that. So, yeah, that's something that I just thought, "Uh-oh, we've gone a little bit too far into that realm, and we've really normalized, uncomfortable feelings get a diagnosis, and it's not helpful."
And it's also, I think, the final thing that it does, which is why I think it limits us, is that what it tells us is that if I'm feeling uncomfortable, that means there's something wrong with me. And so, like that example of the phone call is it's probably an uncomfortable phone call. You're putting yourself out there, you're taking a risk. That is exactly how you should feel going into that phone call. But it's almost like the way we use this language now and so flippantly is if you are feeling discomfort before the phone call, that means you're suffering from something because everyone else feels perfectly comfortable doing that phone call. And I feel like and I remember having this conversation and I didn't use the word social anxiety, but I said I get nervous networking and I hate it. And someone looked at me and said, basically everyone hates it, right? Like everyone finds it nerve wracking. And no, in my head, I'd assumed that most people love it and that I was unique. And just having that correction was really helpful in going, oh, yeah, this should feel uncomfortable. It feels uncomfortable for most people. That discomfort is perfectly normal. Go on and get it done. And actually, it lowered some barriers to participation because I was like, well, I'm surrounded by other people who feel equally as nervous. So I can talk to them and they'll be delighted.
Yeah, I think that's so true is that we're introducing, I think we're introducing that, but equally, we're not developing resilience. So we're kind of saying, "Oh, we are, atypical from the population, and therefore there's something wrong with us." But equally, we aren't growing in resilience and grit, and I suspect that's there's a lot of chatter about that as well. I know, again, they are far more complicated, generation that is growing up in a, very complicated digital life, and a world of uncertainty, but I do think that she used it as an excuse to get out of something that would have grown her. And I've been thinking about this a little bit because I've been wondering, first of all, watching the Olympics and watching these people that hurt, and I used to hurt as a young kid, you know? I'd know how to hurt in races and exercise and watching these people collapse across the finishing line, and I'm like, "I wonder why I strive to have a life of comfort," and I think because that we do want a comfortable life, we don't want to hurt, but what I've been doing is going to boot camp and working a little bit with, like, a personal trainer as part of this, and he is making me hurt, and to get into that world of being uncomfortable again is helping me feel stronger. Like, and it actually is, and it's helping me to be stronger. And I've just thought of that as a, isn't that interesting that I'm seeking comfort in my life? And it's taken someone to reintroduce me to a little bit of pain in order to grow and to get stronger. So, anyway, just thought I'd
No,
throw that out
I
there.
agree with you, and I think it's something I was thinking about this at treating last night because I was just like, I have these 3-day migraines. I'm getting them sorted, hopefully. Feels like we're getting under control. But I was exhausted. Like my arms didn't want to move. I didn't like I was like, ugh. And but I think probably we were raised in somewhat similar ways. I came from a military family. Giving up is not an option. So like I'm like got my weight belt on and I'm like, I'm feeling exhausted, but like I can do it. This is just discomfort that I can push through, which of course I've probably gone to the extreme with that sometimes where I'm pulling back a bit. But there is something kind of nice about recognizing your limits, but also recognizing that emotions are really normal and discomfort is really normal. And of course, we're wired to not want it because for most of history, our whole lives were deeply uncomfortable. um, and so I just, yeah, I feel like for this conversation, and like we're sort of, wandering all over the show, there is just something about almost being more intentional with the language we use. Um, for those reasons we said, to be respectful to other people, to not race to the bottom and to not assume that feeling uncomfortable makes us a problem. It's that we actually can just embrace discomfort, but also to your point, because that's where we grow. And so, sort of saying I can't do it because I have a problem with it means that we don't, we give ourselves permission not to feel the discomfort. And again, like I don't want to keep repeating this, but like we are very aware that we are talking about people slapping on labels, not people who have serious mental health conditions. Like, yeah.
No, because and to be fair, we wouldn't be talking about this if this wasn't now well researched. And actually, there's a growing concern about this being a real social, real. We're socializing this now, so I think it's okay to call this out. And you'd mentioned this term "race to the bottom" earlier, and it got me curious as to what that actually meant. And I did a little bit of research, and I found this really interesting article. I'm going to read a paragraph from it, but there's a growing concern that people are not only doing it to, I suppose, a limit their growth because they're feeling a very natural feeling, but they're wearing these diagnoses with pride and almost using it as a form of identity, which is really interesting. So this is from a medical article, and they've done some macro research related to this. And at one part of it's really interesting. It says the culture of diagnosis. We've created a culture where having diagnosis is not only accepted, but celebrated. Mental health awareness campaigns, while well intentioned, again, this is someone's perspective off the back of research, have had unintended consequences. We've made psychiatric labels fashionable. Teens now compete over who has more diagnoses. Adults introduce themselves by their conditions, as someone with anxiety has become a common sentence opener, as if the label grants automatic credibility on any topic related to stress or discomfort. When a diagnosis becomes a defining characteristic rather than a description of symptoms, the person disappears behind the label.
I think they've put it way better than, exactly what we're trying to say, but way better. And I think this is, yeah, that it I think this is the challenge that we have with this, is that I think humans, the way we're all social creatures, and a shortcut to understanding who someone is their life experiences and what they've been through. And I think the Olympics is a great example of this, of like when you see an Olympian on the gold medal stand, they are telling you the struggle that they have gone through in order to achieve at that level. And you know something about them. And almost what's happened is we know these mental health conditions are very closely correlated with struggle. When you have a genuine mental health condition, you have been through the ringer. And so being able to say to put that label on, you're effectively short circumventing and going, I've also done it. So um, I've built credibility. I've told yeah, well, almost. You almost are saying, it's a shortcut for saying for credibility in an area, but it's not the same thing. And it's just, humans love to it's how we interact, it's how we show who we are. And it's just that it's now become so widespread that yeah, we use it as a way of going, I am this, and thus you need to take me seriously. This is how I understand who I am. And I think that what did you say? The person disappears behind it. It's so true. There are so many people I know loosely these days who all I know about them is the mental health or the labels they put on themselves. Like, it's the first thing I hear. It's the only thing I hear. Like, I don't know what they're interested in, what their hobbies are. I know so much about all their diagnoses, and that's it. And I find that really sad because they are more than that. Even if they haven't had a diagnosis, quite often they haven't even had one.
Well, in many, as we look at a number of these mental health diagnoses, they're actually an absence of something else and or their description of symptoms. So that is why it is such a broad spectrum because it is generally a description of symptoms that they can say with some level of confidence they can give you a diagnosis. And the problem with describing yourself as a description of symptoms is it then becomes the label, and that's what we introduced up top. Is like you're labeling yourself with a syndrome. And I think we're doing it the same thing here, a couple hundred years later, is that we are labeling ourselves as something core to our being and our personality when actually we're navigating the world, some of us with a description of symptoms for some of us, and therefore have to act accordingly and care for ourselves accordingly. But then for others, it is impeding all sorts of things, which I think we've already talked about and raised. And the interesting thing about this is never in history has there been such social contagion, especially among teen girls. They're seeing it. Like, not only are these labels being highlighted and amplified, but language around it is spreading as well. And that's why I did call my daughter a few times on it and kind of just thought, oh, this is that's a clinical thing. And if you think you have that, let's go and get that sorted. To which, she stopped immediately. But I just think yeah, it's so interesting. And I think that is the collective race to the bottom. I think we've called out that how are you busy? We're celebrating this busy and stressed and burnout culture. Oh, and then burnout. And yes, we do get there. And yes, we are doing too much. And yes, expectations are too high on women. This is actually about, are we celebrating that and are we leading with that? Because then where does it lead us?
Yeah, I feel like that's the ultimately culturally, that's where it goes because I think it is predominantly women doing it. Like, it'd be interesting to know. I probably have too much of a bubble. But if you have a whole 51% of the population who is more inclined to talk about social anxiety, being chaotic, being disorganized, I feel like I hear this a lot. And again, this is from people without a diagnosis. My ADHD brain means I'm terrible at this. And I'm like, are you? Or have you just never tried it? Or like, because you don't have a diagnosis. So you've just like literally shut off a whole thing and told yourself you can't do it because of something that the people I know who have ADHD diagnoses are actively working on how they can still manage that in their life and do that in their life. And yeah, so it's almost, I think it is the celebration and the excuse and the feeling like I can not do it or that there's something different about me. And that's probably another thing with humanity. We are living in an era where it's so noisy and we're watching people online and we're so influenced by this noise and all these people living their best lives online. And humans crave this sense of identity and being different and being loved and having our tribes. And it almost feels like this has now become a way of going, I am this and here's my tribe versus like, nah, nah, you're actually great. And you've got like so many things that are interesting about you that this should be the least interesting thing about you, not the most.
I think what you're calling out is that labels are not neutral, and we display that in this talk of like, these are not neutral labels. They mean something, and they are not benefiting women. They're not putting us at advantage. The structural problems around us should be the focus, or the unfair expectations, or whatever it is that's causing us to be uncomfortable. Again, assuming those that do not have mental health issues or real diagnoses. So the labels that we're putting ourselves that are not neutral are in fact harming us. They're not allowing us to grow or take a step forward. And so I wanted to be just really clear on that, that when we fling them about, we are doing ourselves a disservice rather than shining a light on the environment around us, the frameworks around us, and being able to positively navigate through those and change them, change the environment, as opposed to saying we're the ones that have the problem and have to
Yeah.
change. Mm.
Yeah, yeah, and shout out to all the incredible people we know who are getting diagnoses in their 40s. We know that traditionally women have been tragically underdiagnosed when it comes to things like ASD and ADHD and various things that were only really studied on men and boys, and there's criminal negligence in the healthcare sector that has led to those diagnoses, and I think that's probably why women a good leading indicator of why women are maybe more interested in this because there hasn't traditionally been an understanding of the symptoms and we're only just starting to recognize that it plays out quite differently. And I just hugely applaud people who go and find out more about their brains and are doing their utmost for themselves and their children to and the support that they want and that they need and deserve. And so this is just for the rest of us who and none of us at this stage surely believe that there's such a thing as neurotypical. Like, our brains are all wired so differently, but slapping on a label when you don't need to slap on a label, when you could just focus on the feeling you're feeling, it does have consequences for a lot of
Yeah.
things.
Oh, well said. Hear, hear. Thank you, everyone, for listening yet again to our, chatter. That was great.
We'd love your thoughts too. This is a good one because I feel like this is something sort of like managing generational teams. This is a phenomenon that feels like it probably does impact a lot of people. And there are people, like I've even heard of workplaces now, and I think this is brilliant, who have mental health advocates, I think their names are. And they are appointed or volunteers in an organization where people who are feeling different things can go to them. And I feel like all of these initiatives are amazing. And then I think about my reality is would I go to a colleague about that without knowing that they have, like I feel like a lot of these things we're so early stage in figuring out how they all work and whether or not they work that I think these are important conversations to have and really again honing in on no stigma for any different brain wiring or mental health issues. Those are genuine and they are important to get support for. And we should be able to have these conversations around how do we talk about these things and normalize or unnormalize slapping on labels on ourselves.
Yeah, well, I do think it can happen at home and in our schools and institutions. I really do. We've got to find the balance, I suppose. We've got to provide those places and structures in place for those that need the support, and then we have to still um, create environments where people can, unfortunately, get uncomfortable. Because, like, really, I don't like getting uncomfortable, but like, we need to do it. So,
Well, yes, and I actually would equally love to hear from anyone who strongly disagrees with us and just thinks because, we're in our 40s. We might be like old and outdated in these ideas. Like this may be something that you feel really strongly that the consequences of unnormalizing slapping on labels actually has a really profound impact on how the progress we've made on mental health. Like tell us. I'd love to know that and we will have another conversation on a future pod about what we've learned as a result.
deal. Thanks, everyone. Check out hello@powersuit.com. Drop us a line if you want us to chat or dig into anything. We'd be happy to do that. And we'll catch you all next time. Bye.
Bye.